Thanks everybody for coming. Nikki, Lone, Marina, Alona, Garrett, thanks for coming tonight on this cold evening. I'm going to come a bit closer because we're gonna look at the drawing. So tonight is around urban. The topics around urban form, and we need to, in a very focused way tonight, articulate what came out of the workshops previously. From here on, we are producing a Revit three-dimensional model, which is fairly accurate, and this model will be presented to the community as a joint effort from all of us to say that this is what came out of our group. So this evening is just another opportunity again to go through it and make sure that we didn't miss anything, that we can also discuss the detail of it, add anything or take anything away. Okay, so I'm going to ask Yona, who's taken some of the comments and he's started to spatialize it, and he can take us through what the color codings, all the annotations are.
Okay, sorry. There's some handouts here if people would like a handout. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, great. So, like Demi said, this is a summary of what came out of the focus group, and I'll just quickly go through the diagram. There were comments from the community regarding urban form that item 1 preserve the heritage. So these buildings that are highlighted in red are all the currently identified buildings in terms of heritage. So there's a very strong request of retaining the heritage, obviously. Also the village character was quite a strong consideration in retaining the village character, the scale, the proportions and rhythm. There was comments from the community that there needs to be a general, there seems to be a bit of a lack of general upkeep and maintenance of buildings, and so it's kind of a general upgrade that's required onto the buildings. Then these kind of strips that we've identified along Main and in Lothbury at the bottom, these areas where the community mentioned that if there are to be intensification or bulking of built opportunities, that it should be very selective, and we should identify very specific portions of land that will allow for it in terms of open space kind of portions at the moment, and we've kind of identified these areas to start looking and engaging the discussion in terms of intensifying development along those edges. Then also there were comments from the community regarding supportive land use. They wanted to see more land use and building kind of uses, applications that are supportive of this whole idea of the village character or the kind of mixed-use environment, which is which creates a sustainable and responsive environment in terms of supporting and providing people with opportunities that they would need in this community. Then incremental, if there are intensification, the idea is that it will gradually, there's a certain scale and a height condition that we need to respect, and it will most probably intervention of growing the height potentially away from the current 4th and 7th Street precinct, and then also creating gateways. There were repeated comments regarding kind of gateways or entrances into Melville. So we kind of, from a previous exercise which dealt with transport and movement, kind of looked at these points as potential gateways into the precinct. Yeah, I think it's open for comment and discussion. Okay. There's lots of cookies here to write and draw on.
Sorry, might I please just ask you which streets these are?
This is 7th Street,
okay,
and then in a Kings down into Lothbury, and this is Main.
Okay.
This is 4th Avenue. Yeah, we're standing here now. This is
this is
27 boxes here.
I understand. So this is 4th and this is 5th here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Could you just summarize again what the colors?
This yellow color identifies the current sensitive area in terms of heritage and the village character, which is, so we kind of just demarcated this along 4th and the top of 7th as a kind of quite sensitive area. Not to say that the rest is not sensitive, because there are historical buildings scattered within the area, and then these blue kind of strips are indicating potentially towards some future development or growth opportunity. Yeah.
So there's a protection around the yellow area that
Yes.
we try to retain that character as it is.
Yeah.
And that the
Okay.
blue areas are supported within the current policies of the corridors of freedom and intensification.
Okay. Could I please just ask, because I'm here speaking on behalf of the Residents Association. Jean-Dominique can't be here. She tenders her apologies. She echoes what I'd like to ask you, as well as Willem Prinsloo. Would you please point out for me, perhaps so everyone else here knows as well, show us the page number in the city's policy documentation where densification is earmarked, please. Because until we can see that it's in the city's policy documents, like you say, we cannot accept this.
So that's not the objective of this conversation, to point out all sorts of pages. We're here to ratify what came out of our meetings now.
I understand
and
you.
to spatialize it.
I do understand you. But the fact is we've been told something which has never been proven. So how can we make recommendations based on a rumor? Give us, just let us have the page numbers so we can be satisfied that that's what the city intends.
Those
So-
areas that have been identified since the very first LIDS.
I'm simply asking for a specific reference.
Okay, I can give you the page number.
I'd
It's
like
in
it,
the-
please.
or in the IDP.
Because you know, it doesn't help for us to make recommendations
Yeah.
and I'm here to simply ask that the facts be presented as they are in the city's documents.
Okay, so mine will be the
You know.
So then to go to number one, the question now is, in terms of detail, how do we actually start to preserve that heritage? What type of interventions do we create to preserve that type of heritage, that style? So, for example, and I'll just start the conversation, for example, one way of doing is repainting. I think you've contributed to Red and Roses in the way that it was cleaned up.
before, when it was IT.
Yeah, and that was a way of acknowledging the heritage and the character of that space. I think our public space and what we discussed last week also about making the streets feel safer, making them more pedestrian orientated, also contributes to acknowledging that character of that street in terms of its urban form, but also in terms of preserving heritage. Maybe there are maybe other suggestions or ways that we can portray this in our documents. In other words, if we could put a glass case around these beautiful buildings and put them in a museum, we would. So perhaps there's issues around restoration, creating relationships with landlords to help upkeep and restore the heritage of these buildings, but also it could relate to wayfinding and signage that talks about our buildings. That all contributes to those things. What do you think?
Well, aren't there already heritage legislation in place where buildings of a specific age or greater, actually, if there's going to be any significant change to them, it actually has to be approved by a heritage group? So, I mean, surely that's one thing that should already be in place. Probably in that issue, the problem is management of that.
Yeah.
You're quite right. For instance, heritage sign-off needs to come from the Residents Association. We do that regularly.
And frag.
Could
Potential
I-
heritage.
I'm a complete outsider here, so I'm from Spain, so my knowledge of South Africa is limited. But one of the things that I'm having a question to ask you is why, I mean, it seems that you have a heritage area here that you want to keep, or to keep like it is, no? My understanding is you want to keep these buildings as how they are historically, because they're part of the heritage of Melville, okay? So, I mean, in the UK, where I work most of the time, one of the problems with heritage, when I work with heritage, is that if buildings don't have a use, they become vacant. You know, if there's not a use for that building, either a cafe or startup unit, the whole place starts dying. And a lot of the problems we have in town centers are that they are dying because people don't invest, they don't see the prospect of a business there. So my first question is like, you know, it's not just about the style of the building, but what is the use of those buildings and how you could have maybe like a complete framework of how you could utilize those buildings, which opportunities for business are here, because an urban framework, if there's an economic business plan, doesn't work by itself. So that would be my first kind of suggestion in a way. But then the other thing which I don't understand, and maybe is kind of coming from a very dense country, because in Spain we're super densified, Barcelona is like 400 units per hectare, is why you seem to have like a kind of very low density approach instead of looking at the possibility of increasing that density, not specifically in the areas where you have the existing heritage, but in the new areas, okay? And I don't mean going, for God's sake, 8 stories against a building that is 3 stories, but you could have a kind of incremental approach where some units, because I think one of the problems, okay, and I mean, I've been to South Africa before, traveling all over the country, but this is my second time in Johannesburg, and one of the problems we also have in Europe at the moment is this idea of a gated community, of a place of safety where people put CCTV. London is becoming one of these places because people think, oh, in Europe you can walk in the street and it's safe. Not always, you know. After 8 p.m. you take a cab everywhere. So we're obsessed with security. And I realized that CCTV is, the UK is the biggest country with CCTV cameras. And it's the highest crime because it doesn't record the voice. So you cannot legally put somebody in prison because of a crime. So I think, what about some sort of passive surveillance in some of these areas where there's business and housing and different uses?
If I can provide a little bit of information.
Yeah. I'm just giving some suggestions.
There is sometimes some apprehension.
In a way, why?
Regarding increasing density is because South Africa in general and Johannesburg in specific has got a terrible tradition of illegal land use.
Oh, really? Okay.
Where people use properties for illegal purposes against the zoning and the zoning for the land, for the use for that particular property, and also non-existent law enforcement regarding land use.
In which way?
The city of Johannesburg does virtually nothing. If they find there's a commune with 50 students living in a small house, it takes them 5 years to close the commune if they decide to do something. And so the neighbors have to suffer for 5 years before action is taken. And so that's the reason why densification is sometimes considered to be a threat to the residential amenity. It's because there is an apprehension that the city is not going to improve its law enforcement. In fact, it will increase the risks of illegal land use and of crime. And so that's the perception which
that's a perception, but in Madrid, city which I've studied, the capital of Spain, we have a massive problem, which is similar to South Africa, in unemployment of young people. Young people that qualify and don't have a job to do. So there was a massive site that people were going to demolish called Matadero, which was an old slaughterhouse, and they didn't have enough money to do the job, so they had lack of funding. But what they did was strip the place, put some temporary offices, and start up businesses for young people. And this is controlled by government. You know, it was a government protocol, and it's very successful to the point that last year they invited programs from South Africa and Nigeria to come to Spain and learn from each other's experiences. And I think, with all problems, I think I totally agree with you in the sense of preventing this problem, but also to look at the solution and some lateral thinking about how maybe by a small intensification we can provide a better solution than what we already have.
There's a very close correlation between densified areas and crime levels.
In illegal settlements, but not in permitted development.
There's a very close correlation.
It's quite the opposite. It's actually quite the opposite. The more dense the area, the more people on the street, the more activity, the reduction in crime.
So why don't you go move to Yeovil then? It's very dense there, and it must be very safe.
Other examples. Don't ask me stupid questions, okay? Because it's it's not really
Okay,
a
so
problem.
I think it's very clear that densification means something very different to Derek. But I just need you to acknowledge that other people think about densification differently.
I understand you.
Also,
I
can I just
appreciate
finish?
it. Yeah.
So it's also about managing who the landlords are.
Sure.
We should use our legal arms to kind of, and we should use vehicles like the MRA to help control and manage those type of people. And
I
you can
agree
cultivate
with
a different culture
You're
of
right.
who lives here and how we live, but
You're
also living side by
absolutely
side.
right, Tim, but
So
I've got no issue with
it's
it at all.
it's a bit
But
limited.
the problem
to
is we're
just
not
think-
here to discuss
It's
enforcement.
limited to think densification is a problem, but it's way much more dynamic than that.
Yeah. No,
You know,
look,
Derek,
I
I just
understand
want to give
you.
an
I
example.
understand, but all I'm saying is, and I'd like to repeat, please point out the page numbers in the city's
But no,
present
no,
policy.
because
No, I'd like it.
Lauren drew
I'd like
up.
it
She
now.
read the first draft.
Okay.
She did it.
I'd like
So she
the
will
actual
give it.
policy documents to show
She
that
will give it to
densification
you.
is, and I'll
You
tell you
already
why.
asked it, and she's going
I'll
to
tell
give it
you
to you.
why. Bridget Steer, our ward councillor,
States that.
Bridget Steer, our ward councillor, has made a public. Please let me finish.
Well, you constantly talking.
Okay. Bridget Steer, our ward councillor, has made a public
You never
statement
finish.
that densification is not planned for Melville. Is she lying?
Additional densification.
The only densification is according to existing land use zone. Am I correct?
Which is what already.
So if you've got a 3-story flat here, someone can bash it down and build another 3-story flat. You can't do anything about that. Am I right? So I'm glad you've pointed out there's 3 kind of nodes, because I think they're all different. Melville isn't a uniform
should
place.
go all the way down to there.
Of course you'd like it to go all the way down there.
I think it would be nice
Okay.
if it's near your home.
Yes, I know. I know.
Because it's the only thing you worry. That's the only reason why you want to.
I'm afraid my expenses of today. Yeah. I lost my sense. I lost my sense of humor a long time ago regarding
You
this.
never had a sense of humor.
Please don't insult me.
You insult
Okay.
me all the time.
I'm here to participate. But anyway, I'd appreciate, please, the specific reference to the present
No, it's
policy
going to give it to
documentation, not the draft, the present documentation that allows for densification beyond the present property use restrictions, because there's none.
It's not necessarily beyond, but the point is that those areas that have
Because this gentleman said for future, because this gentleman said for increased development.
She's answering you, Derek, but you fail to listen.
I think
so
the
why don't
You don't have to tell me how to respond.
trying to answer you?
Yeah, no, whatever. Yes?
the areas that are demarcated in yellow
Yes.
are areas where use changes were taking place anyway.
Yes.
So houses were being converted into restaurants or into communes or offices, and well, both. You know,
Correct.
the point is we know that law enforcement and that is an issue, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean we should stop thinking about how to do things.
Yeah.
So those areas that were marked in yellow was that there were already changes that were taking place. So how could we embrace those in a way that would do the sort of thing we were talking about? It doesn't necessarily preserve a house as a house, but it preserves the character of the place as a business. Yeah. So that's
Okay.
the intention of that area.
Okay.
Along Main Road, there's already an intensification because there's 3 and 4 story blocks.
I don't think anything's been built in Main Road for 20 years, though.
It doesn't matter, but the point is those rights, as you say, already exist.
They do.
They're zone business and
They
they
do.
are enabled to have a mixed use.
Yeah.
So the idea was to allow that to intensify in areas where it hasn't happened. So there are a lot of maybe single-story buildings on corners and things that could be much better utilized for things like mixed use, so residential and offices.
No, that's so long as we all agree, like you say.
You never let anyone finish their sentence. You know?
No, you can't.
I'm afraid I'm a busy guy and I've got to leave in a few
So
minutes.
why don't we go to
You know, I'm also busy. I'm also here to expensive of my time. So the idea is nobody is indicating that should go to 8-story buildings or anything, but it is about intensifying the use so that we don't have all the things standing empty and derelict and not being used. And in some way encouraging people to come and develop those properties into properties that can be managed properly.
Okay,
And
and
the whole issue is around, and I know we've had this discussion before, things like social housing. You know, everyone goes, no, we don't want social housing here. Well, actually, social housing institutions are required to comply with a whole lot of regulations. They have a vested interest in maintaining their buildings and managing them properly, because otherwise they lose their accreditation. discussion. And, those are the sort of things that we should be encouraging.
I can remember.
Because otherwise, we will get absentee landlords and people invading buildings.
I can remember you saying this a few years ago, actually. I do remember you saying it a few years ago when we met last. But all I'm saying is let's understand that you can't increase the present land use restrictions that are on these properties here.
Intensification doesn't necessarily mean increasing the parcel of rights. It means that the property needs to work harder. It can do a lot more in terms of the street, in terms of the variety, in terms of the mix, in terms of opportunity. I'm not saying we now need to go 8-10 stories. That's not what intensification
that's what scares people.
Yeah.
What we proposed was Garrett.
I think we're starting to rehash conversations that have happened multiple times before. And I think in the previous workshop, what the focus of discussion was trying to get to the nitty-gritty and the details of how you place controls on that development. There's a lot of talk about maintaining character, but you can't just put maintaining character in a precinct because developers will come in with an army of lawyers who prove that they're maintaining character no matter what they do. So you've got to be able to document what that character is. And that's going to be different on 7th than it is on Main. On 7th, it might have a height restriction. There are already height restrictions there, 3 stories.
Can we go into detail now while we're there?
So let's get to what we can actually put that would control how these things happen, rather than debate about what happened. I think everyone's agreed that 4 stories, which is allowed on Main Road, was something that we had discussed. Can we cap it at 4 stories?
Yes.
You already have 3-story buildings there. Nobody's going to knock down a 3-story building to build a 4-story building. It doesn't make any financial sense. It encourages renovation of existing building stock and only encourages larger buildings in cases where you have relatively small program area on a valuable site.
So we don't really do agree then. We don't really have the mandate. No one here has the mandate to recommend to the city that the land use rights here change or that they increase.
Nobody's proposing
That's
that.
fine,
It's
then
just
I'm
some
happy.
people who haven't heard that.
No, then I'm happy. And then regarding the heritage here, the protection of the heritage concern area here, is there a study that's been performed or is it just an assumption regarding that this area must be heritage preserved more than these ones? Is there a study you can point us to, please?
Well, heritage by nature needs to be preserved for buildings older than 60
I understand,
years.
but why did you colour in this yellow and this in blue? There must be a study that backs you up.
If I can just point out, if you look on the map, most of the red buildings are situated in that yellow zone. And all the red buildings are heritage buildings.
Actually,
There's a lot here.
I think in our entire area there are a hell of a lot of heritage buildings because Melville and Auckland Park were constructed between about 1910 to 1940, and every single one of the buildings in there is in excess of 60 years, which I think is the kind of regulation. So in fact, having the little red dots is a little bit of a misnomer, for want of a better term, because in essence the whole area should be red. Anything that's over 60 years old.
There's a specific
I'll tell you what I find very interesting, though. I did an interview last week with the people who are complaining about a proposed 6-story student accommodation system here. Okay. And I interviewed a guy who's lived in this road for many years, and he spoke about the fact that a number of the houses on here are heritage houses, and a number of them are listed as having significant architectural issues, yet there's only one red dot there. So that tells me that possibly this map is not exactly accurate
and the reason
in terms of what is required.
The reason I asked about
only
heritage.
indicates that those are buildings where there's a change in use and it has a mix of uses. It's not purely residential.
Okay, but the reason I asked the question about heritage, there was a specific reason. I didn't ask it just to be funny. Okay, we know that heritage consultants have prepared reports on Melville for Corridors of Freedom, and I don't know why you haven't accessed those.
We do have access to it.
Well, why didn't you tell us then that you've got them? I've asked you, can you please show us the studies? And you've said nothing. Because those consultants said that only the top part of Melville here might be affected in the Corridors of Freedom as regarding heritage. The rest, they have recommended not be interfered with. I know that. I've asked the guy who's headed up the study, and that's why I'm asking you.
I think it's also one of the things that we can do with it.
So, if you could just recap, what is the actual question that you're asking me?
May we please have a look at the heritage study that
Of course,
you've referred
I can send it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we can just work out the details. So we're recapping what we said on Main Road, for example. Let's start there. We said that we want to cap it at 4 stories. And even though I think we can go up 6, we would like to keep it at a 4. So if any first stories needs to go up, we would welcome it. But there's also a character that we wanted to maintain. It was about signage we spoke about.
Bring back.
Sorry?
Bring back as far as Main Road is concerned.
Bring back Main Road. So it's about consistency of signage. We spoke about the aesthetic of face bricks. So we need to find in this meeting a system, a mechanism, and I'll turn to you, Jerry, because we need help around this. How do we start to frame this when someone wants to go from 1 story to 4 stories, and it's an alteration, whatever? How do we, through the MRA or some sort of mechanism, control and contribute and ask them, can you accommodate the same aesthetic as this guideline that we are trying to create?
Well, we know that most of the properties in Melville, which are presently residential, have the right to go up to 3 stories. However, each time a property owner wants to do that, he has to have sign-off and agreement from all of the neighbours. He's got to bring an application to the City of Johannesburg. The application can be opposed and it can be defeated by the neighbours who say, this doesn't suit us.
Does it have to come through the MRA?
The neighbours must have
The MRA.
They must have a very good reason for saying no. They
No,
can't
the
just
guy
say
who wants
no.
to build 3 stories has to have a good reason for saying yes. He has to
No,
motivate
quite
it.
opposite.
The onus is on him to motivate it.
But if,
And by the way,
if it's your right-
regarding that, the MRA,
It's not a simple extension of a building.
the MRA, what happens is, presently, the MRA receives reports from neighbours, from residents, to say, this guy has built 3 stories. We don't know if he's even applied for permission. He's never spoken to us, the neighbour. We then go and investigate it. We go and see if there's an application at the City of Johannesburg. We go and see whether his building plans have been submitted or approved. And that's all we do, is we give information to the residents to say, this is what you can do. We'll help you with some information. Okay. At the moment, the Melville Residents Association doesn't have to sign off on an alteration to go to a 2nd story, for instance. We don't have that authority. We never have.
But
So-
you need to approve it before the Heritage Committee
So-
will approve it.
Yes,
Heritage won't approve anything until
Yes.
the residents'
So-
associations give it their okay.
Well, the Residents Association does have a heritage portfolio. And every time, and we actually get lots of applications from people who want to turn their garage into a cottage or something like that. And we provide the heritage sign-off if we feel that it's appropriate.
So there's no way that we can actually control the aesthetic of 4th Street.
You
so to
can't
say.
rely on the Residents Association to do that. We do our best,
I don't
but we have
believe
limited
one should.
resources.
I don't believe one should control the aesthetic because then you might as well sell the whole street to one developer and then it all looks the same. Part of its charm is that people can you can give them guidelines in terms of how wide the pavement must be. Must there be a tree or a whatever? I don't know. I don't know these sorts of things. But I can't say to you, you must like the same style.
I think
of
it would be an
building.
excellent idea, though, because you raise the possibility. It would be an excellent idea if the Residents Association was given a say on whatever level, that they are given a say to make recommendations. Maybe they can't veto it or they can't approve it, but they can make recommendations to influence
A
the city.
particular character
Okay.
of the street.
And I think that's not a bad idea. The reason why the Residents Association is made up of volunteers who actually want to preserve our suburb. It's not made up of businessmen or people who want to make money. We're residents and we're trying to make sure that the suburb stays as beautiful as it has been.
Can I just say that all the white areas on this plan fall under that procedure? Okay, so it doesn't need to be
Yeah.
identified as kind of individual stands. And as I keep saying, the yellow zone is where there's mixes of uses, where it's not just residential, where there's already businesses and restaurants and hairdressers.
You're quite right.
So it's a
quite right.
zone in which different uses are part of the application, are part of the transformation. The rest of the white area has this blanket procedure about if you want to add something, you want to add another floor, whatever, you have to go through the committee and you have to go through heritage and you have to go through council council and stuff. You also know that lots of stuff happens without going through that procedure, and that's a whole other kind of discussion.
Unfortunately, it's happened today at the bottom of Main Road. That restaurant has just gotten rights to run as a restaurant today in the High Court without getting permission from anyone. It's actually shocking.
But the other thing is that things like around Campus Square. Now, when that was developed, there was a very specific basket of rights that attached to that property. And that strip, which has remained green, was preserved for residential development to be a buffer between the retail and the call centre and the houses in Streetley Avenue.
Yeah.
There was a proposal that on the skinnier strip that there would be semi-detached houses developed along there that would be equivalent to one house on the other side. So it would be one semi looks like the other house. And on the wider strip, there was a proposal for 3-story kind of walk-up residential area.
I understand from someone who's in Streetley here, they told me that there was a hearing last week where someone has applied to do a 6-story building, like you said.
But you see, those things shouldn't be approved. And my question there is, I believe that there's a big parking garage program.
Absolutely.
How did they get permission to do that within the existing basket of rights? They must have applied.
It is a very scandalous set of facts.
Yeah.
I can't share them with you now.
Campus Square goes back to scandalous right from the beginning. Anyway. I mean, there was an educational component, and the educational component is the call centre because they train people there.
Can I just ask you before?
So those get conflated.
I apologise for taking up more time than some of the others, but may I just ask you, is this your study area? Is this the mandate you were given by the city? Or is this beyond your study area?
So the original, it's the physical boundary which someone drew, a client drew on a piece of paper was this, or something like this.
Yeah, it's downstairs.
But the ethos and the culture or the philosophy behind the project is it's about how we make cities. It's about intensification, not in terms of built form, but how we bring people to transport connections. So anything that's related to it and affects the person here is connected
I understand
somehow.
you, but
so there's a physical barrier and there's also like a
I understand you,
psychological connection.
but are you mandated to make recommendations outside your study area? Yes or no?
So we can still make a recommendation. Whether it happens or not comes down to the actual project. So, for example, the ward council might have some money and she wants to sort out all of this roads. And we can say, can we extend it up to that point because it's about continuity. So it comes down to that actual project. And it's about continuity.
But I need to ask you, are you mandated to make recommendations in this precinct plan beyond your study area?
But wouldn't it benefit us, even if that wasn't part of the original boundary? Doesn't it benefit us to include it?
It doesn't matter. We're not mandated to make recommendations to the city that have not mandated Denver to recommend on.
But ultimately, this goes through council. This gets presented to City Council. If it gets adopted, it gets adopted.
No, not at all. Denver's only, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but Denver agreed to the study area here. That's it.
But wouldn't we want
Does
to
it worry
place...
you if
We
that's
can't
all?
give authority to Denver. We aren't the city of Johannesburg, and we can't give him extra authority.
This is a participatory meeting. Our mandate comes through participation.
But our
The
mandate,
actual precinct plan
we
comes through an
participate
act of
in this
council.
area. That's what we've been asked to do, not this
We're
area.
not putting in
What
ideas.
would you
My
like
point
to
is
see?
that wouldn't we want to place the controls we want
I'd like to
in
see
that
that we stick
area
to the
as
rules.
well?
That's
Because are any of us happy
not too
about
much
what's
to
going
ask.
on at Campus Square
Rules are for
and
the
APSA
guidance
right
of
now?
foods.
No.
Sorry?
Also for the
We
guidance
benefit
of
from being
foods.
No, I'm sorry.
Really?
I'd like to make sure that we stick to the rules and that we stick to the study area. I think that's a fair
So,
question.
for example, this part is part of our precinct plan. Public space is important because we access that and the copies. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop it right there and say that if there are security issues, that we can now not address it simply because of this imaginary line the client drew. It's still part of our existence and we still use it.
When you
on
say
a
the
Saturday
client,
and
you mean the
Sunday.
city of Joburg?
The
The city of Joburg,
interfaces
all I'm saying is...
you can't do it in isolation.
It functions as a system.
I mean, if you take all the traffic and the movement and everything into consideration, there is interfaces that you have to accommodate that has an impact in the study area.
I hear your explanations. However, I've read your mandate documents. I don't think anyone else here has. And that's why I'm asking you why you're going out your study area. You don't have a mandate to go beyond it.
They're suggestions outside of the study area
They have a
because they are
mandate.
linked to the area that we're working in.
There's a
You
mandate
can't
for
ignore it.
And the client is amenable
If
to
somebody else came and did a completely, entirely different plan for that thing, it wouldn't integrate with what we do.
See, I like to work with certainties. I don't like to work with things that we might also look at this, and we might do that. We're not here for that kind of thing.
May I
Otherwise
say
you have no
something,
certainty.
sir? Because what's your name, sir? Sorry.
Derek.
Derek. Okay. I mean, I'm just talking from working in many different cities, which are not my own, in Ireland, Scotland, for a long time. I'm registered in Scotland and I'm Spanish. And to be clear, if there's something which in urban design we call critical mass, and this is the amount of people and businesses that support an existing framework. So if you don't have a critical mass in intensifying the density outside this main area that you are looking to preserve that character, in urban terms, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because, no, let me tell you one thing. If you have these buildings here, which are heritage buildings, and you don't integrate them with the uses of these other corridors, the buildings would become lost. Because, Spain and Italy, we have a lot of heritage. And unless you integrate those buildings with existing context, it's not going to work. A plan has to go into the outside context. You cannot just look at the plan in an insular way, because then what happens is somebody applies for a car parking space or a 6-story here, and then what happens is you get little different pockets of bad planning or a space left over after planning, and that's why it's really important that you work with this area and look at the rest of the area, because the reason why I like Melville when I came yesterday and Denver drove me over is because as a woman I feel safe. It's a very safe place. The housing and the architecture is good, the businesses are nice, so you feel welcome. Other parts of the city that I drove today, I didn't feel safe, open the door, come out as a foreigner, right? And I think what you want to make sure is you keep this kind of beautiful character of this place in control. But that control is not, where is the page of this policy document and how that is working, but it's actually a framework that allows you to have a really good urban design with a critical mass that supports that place, because if you lose the critical mass, you lose the character of
What
the
you
place.
say makes perfect sense.
I don't know, I'm a total outsider, so I might not make any sense.
It's my job to work with rules. I'm a lawyer.
Of course.
And I work with rules and I need certainty. And we can't say, well, why don't we also try this and try that? It's not mandated by the city.
Because you don't understand it.
Maybe because I don't understand. You're quite right. And I don't think anyone else here really understands either. And I want that placed on record.
But part of the mandate is...
You don't understand any more than me. And I think you know
I
that.
understand that this is part of a bigger picture.
Jared,
Okay.
you want to say
Even
something?
so, that's your mandate, that's your area, and I want it placed on record.
That's the problem with it,
That's what
because
it is.
People only work within their mandate, and then everything is disconnected, and nothing talks to openness.
Well, then Denver should have renegotiated that before he got the tender.
Part of the mandate is to hold a participatory process, which is
Within this area.
which is what this is, and to respond to the needs of the
Nothing
community.
that
And
we
anyway,
can say.
Okay, that's fine. Look,
ultimately, it's
Thank
to
you.
our benefit to try and control.
Well, why don't we say it's
What
to our
happens
benefit to
there?
build a sports
Because-
stadium here as well, because we all like football. It's not in our mandate to do that.
If we don't do anything here, you're going to get a lot more of what's happening here and here and here, all in that area, because it'll be completely uncontrolled.
You said you're a lawyer and you like control. What stops you from
And I think you
controlling
know
this
you know a lot of the
area?
legislation in Spain as far as it relates to the upkeep of buildings, especially outside. You do realize that every 10 years, building over a certain age and a building over a certain height has to be cleaned by the owner and inspected. That doesn't happen in Johannesburg.
But let me tell you one thing. If you start controlling the boundaries with precision, if you have an urban plan that controls the heights, the design code of how to upkeep that building, that has happened in America quite often in some of the new towns by the new urbanist movement. If you have a code that is not just in this area but belongs to the neighboring areas, then you have a control over the development that gives you a clear plan of height, of use, of where you can go. We had that problem in Edinburgh, in Scotland, and we were precise.
Well,
but I would not
did you
just
know
keep
that
it to
there's
this
a-
area.
Did you know that there's a 2011 precinct plan for Melville? Did you know that?
No, of course not.
One exists
I'm
already for
listening.
Melville. This isn't anything new for Melville, but they want to reinvent the suburb, and I'm concerned about that. There's a precinct plan that has already been in place since 2011.
There's nothing wrong with
Okay,
discussing.
but in 2011, I don't think that when was the Corridors of Freedom finished, completed?
And that's my last question. The Corridors of Freedom doesn't include any recommendations for densification for Melville. Those were published at Marks Park and shown to the public a few months ago. Melville was left untouched. And you know that. The densification for Corridors of Freedom, which you referred to earlier, ends at 2nd Avenue, Melville, and goes west. It stops here. It stops here.
Nobody here is proposing densification.
No, what Denver said is this is in line with the Corridors of Freedom, and I'm saying it can't
rights
be.
Here are 3 stories everywhere,
yes,
subject to all of the procedures that you've mentioned.
Quite
and
right.
Nobody's proposing to change
All I'm
that,
saying is that the densification, the Corridors of Freedom have not interfered one bit, and they've made no new recommendations
I'm just
for Melville.
concerned that you're taking up too much time, and we're actually spending our evening here trying to be very
That's
productive.
fine. We'll address correspondence to you shortly from MRA. Thank
good
you.
idea. All right, let's carry on.
So, in terms of the nature and the character of the street, we have discussed that walking under colonnades and making it feel quite safe with overhead. I want to know from you, how do you think that Main Road should deal with it? Should we try to put this recommendation forward as a vision, that we have this 4 stories, colonnades, signage all cleaned up, and then when there are developments, then I don't know how but somehow we sort of encourage that this is the guidelines, and then that, which is also, I don't think my question was answered, but my question was, in some way, how can the MRA and with Derek's skills help us to kind of push landlords to help encourage them to respect the character, and a particular character of our neighborhood, so that it's well known when you move in. So are there any comments around that Main Road kind of character, so that we can...
The problem is it's very hard to legislate that stuff, because each developer will interpret it in their own way. And I mean, that's why when the MRA Heritage Committee was first started in the Royal Lounge, Derek was part of that as well. And the thing is that, you know, on what grounds do you make the decisions? If you don't have experts as part of the committee, then you're just making arbitrary decisions on what some tiny thinks is the character of Melbourne, you know? And that becomes, and I'm being nasty, but the problem is that unless you know, it's very difficult to legislate heritage as well. You know? And so in the same way, sorry, that you know, if you start to make those kind of guidelines and things, it's like who inspects it? Who has the mandate to sign it off?
Yeah.
Because there's all the regulations at council about what you can and can't do, but who signs it off? Who has the knowledge and the background and stuff to actually do that within the...
At the moment, the heritage person for the MRA is Jan Dumini. She's an attorney. She'll consult with me since I'm an advocate, and we know the Heritage Act.
Yes, but do you know architectural character? Do you know architectural expression? Do you know, which is very much part of heritage, because heritage is not about picking things in vinegar. It's about adaptive reuse and all of those things as well. And that requires a kind of an aesthetic thing, and that's always the difficult thing to actually legislate.
It also involves the level to which you want to change the use of that building.
Yeah.
And so we look at that, and we go and consult, we do a site inspection. We say, what do you want to do? This is a beautiful facade here. Are you going to change that? Are you going to change the look of the outside of this building? And we, in good faith, we take what they say they're going to do, we look at their plans, and we make a recommendation.
I know, but I'm saying that unless you have some sort of expertise in architectural terms and development terms on that committee as well, it's very hard.
All I can say to you, and I'm sorry to sound nasty, but architects planned all the buildings in Main Road, and they look disgusting. Architects were involved there too.
In your opinion, they look disgusting. Some of them are really nice buildings.
There's a couple of points that I think are...
You do. You certainly do.
I think there's a couple of important points here, because you're talking specifically about buildings, but heritage is more than just a series of individual buildings. It's about the character of the neighborhood as a whole. So I think what we're trying to do here is to document what are the design principles that someone would need to adhere to, not only if they're dealing with an existing building, but if they're building something new which is not subject to heritage laws. so that it doesn't completely destroy the heritage character of the neighborhood. Because the Heritage Act is very specific to buildings, and it does a reasonably good job protecting buildings, but it doesn't do anything for neighborhoods. It has nothing to do with the character of an urban system. And what I see the task here is to develop a set of rules in the precinct plan that allow, to the extent possible, and obviously it's impossible to legislate this to its full extent, but to the extent possible to make sure that new buildings correspond with the existing character of the neighborhood. And there's going to have to be some very specific prescriptions for that. I'm not sure what all of them are, but it might have something to do with colonnades on 7th Street. It might have something to do with the setback from the street on Main Road. It might have something to do with heights. It might have something to do with corners. But unless you get them very specifically, there'll always be a way for a designer and a developer to work their way around it.
Is there a way, aren't there precedents from other precinct plans where those guidelines are provided that we can look at? Are there perhaps such precedents?
Well, I've been listening. Hi, everybody. My name is Sabelo. I'm an urban planner. I'm also working on the urban management plan. I've been hearing a lot of the comments that have been coming up, and I think all of them really reveal our thinking around this whole place. But what I want to point out is one of the most important things about precinct plans and understanding what their impact is that whatever we agree on as a community, as the principles we want to uphold for this community, would then be contained within the precinct plan that would be approved by council. And once it's approved by council, it is actually implementable. And through urban management structures and systems, you can be able to set up mechanisms of upkeeping or upholding that, and holding all the landowners and stakeholders within that precinct accountable to ensure that they keep up to that. And now, the question of how to actually implement that, tomorrow we're having another session where we're talking about urban management, and we're going to be going into more details, bringing in also examples of how other precincts have actually brought that into play. How does it work? Once you have the framework is what the vision is all about. It's actually where we agree on the vision of what the area should be. Then the urban management is how do we actually keep that? How do we uphold it? And I like what Derek also pointed out, the issue of management and sort of land use regulations and things like that. That is a common and very well-known challenge around the city of Johannesburg. And it's not going to get any better. So it is through mechanisms like urban management that the city is trying to open itself up for collaboration, allowing communities, us, to actually keep them accountable on managing those sort of things. So urban management creates that window to allow us to actually force the city or keep them accountable on a regular basis to say, listen, we picked up this and it's not been attended to, we've reported it at this time. And because urban management goes to the point where the city can actually approve through the special ratings areas policy, then they are accountable. They have to respond to that. They are obliged or bound by law to respond to that. So those are some of the mechanisms that I just want to throw in there that can actually help in actually how do we implement the ideas, how do we ensure that what we've demarcated here stays as is.
We really do try to follow that. The MRA report illegal communes, for instance.
Yeah, I understand.
And we try our best. The enforcement don't have the manpower to do anything.
Yeah, so you see where urban management comes in and becomes different from structures such as the MRA is it now has the mandate to actually force the city into acting. And also, because it's a comprehensive structure that actually accommodates not just individual, like residential property owners, but all the stakeholders within the precinct. There is more trust between stakeholders. And in that sense, you're building up a situation where people can actually all play an active role. But if there's a perception of lack of trust, already there's lack of trust between residents and the city. And there is also lack of trust between stakeholders and stakeholders within the precinct as we speak. So through a structure that represents everyone and allows everyone to have a similar voice, we adopt a vision that we agree together on, and we are all responsible to upkeeping that, to make sure that that vision is adhered to.
So there's also going to be a steering committee.
Yes.
After this.
Yeah.
Who will draw this whole thing. When we disappear,
yeah.
The steering committee will be set up from all the stakeholders.
Yeah.
Is that in the legislation at the moment, or is it just an idea you guys have?
No, urban management is not just an idea. It is actually adopted by the City of Johannesburg in 2008. And in 2009, they annexed for Region F to actually start implementing this. This was because of a few case studies that they had conducted and seen the actual product of it, or the outcomes of it. So, for one, residents actually started seeing that there was easier response to issues because they were also involved in the managing of their living areas.
Sounds good. Do you know the name of the act so I can just go and read it?
So if you go in the City of Johannesburg and go under the Development Planning Directorate, you'll see there's a couple of sections. There's an urban management section there that talks about urban management within the City of Johannesburg.
And it's legislated.
It's initiated, and it also points out to the specific projects or areas where they've actually implemented. So you can look at the examples.
That's fine. So long as I know it's legislated.
Yeah.
It's actually been passed by the city.
Yeah.
It's funny because he's a lawyer, I'm an architect, you're a planner, so we all see things from our specific lens, so he needs precision. But it's funny when you mentioned the gentleman here, what's your name? Gareth mentioned about character, and you're talking a lot about buildings, but what are the spaces in between the buildings? And one of the problems when I was a resident in Edinburgh, the city where I studied, the capital of Scotland, is a World Heritage Site, but a lot of the development that was coming up was really bad. So, we met with a lot of different stakeholders to try to improve the urban design and the qualities of the character. So what resulted from that was we did a mapping exercise. We mapped what is the style of Edinburgh, what defines the city. So almost like you could map what is the character, not the buildings themselves, of Melville, okay? So we did a very precise document about what the style was. And then we said, we don't want to replicate exactly the same architectural style, but we look at different precedents in the Netherlands or in France of good contemporary projects that were similar to that, and we put that as part of the document of the urban design plan for the city of Edinburgh. And if you are precision, I can send it to Denver. And it's very precise. So what it says is if you build something new here, you have to follow the character of the city. This means so many stories, different mix of uses, because one of the problems we got, somebody wants to put a 5-star hotel or a student accommodation, which completely changes the character of the city, because it becomes a student town rather than a resident town. And then what also they did, in terms of legislation, if somebody, for example, puts here a business or a new residential development, let's say social housing, which is contested in many places, okay? What they said is in this tenancy agreement with the housing association, that you have with the tenants and the housing association, you have to keep up the building has to be maintained, you have to use these colors, which is called design coding. So you can actually first map the character, you then can produce a plan, and then what they did, they created an urban design committee, so any project that happened in that area, people from the local community had a view, or say, diversity, obviously, because you need different stakeholders in the city. And I think something like that could be very useful here because, what you don't want, and I'm sure you're a lawyer, I'm an architect, there's people from different, you're a planner, stakeholders of community, what you don't want is really bad development happening. And this is what tends to happen when you just leave it to economic forces. So I think you can control the process, and I can send to Denver. I don't work in Scotland anymore, but quite a lot of the work that was done later. And it's a Edinburgh is a small city compared to Joburg. But we have a lot of really bad suburban areas, that people don't want anymore because they've changed for the worse, and they were great 20 years ago. But that's the kind of process that you suffer if you don't control this.
I think some of your concerns, I'm sorry for interrupting you,
but
some of your concerns are probably addressed by the heritage study which you've promised to send us. Because those will talk about the appearance and the character, and they'll probably give some details on
she's talking about something else. She's talking about something else.
I'm talking about character.
We're talking about a character that when we walk down the main road, we say that we want to have a particular character that is something that all hangs together and acts on that character of the street. Not the heritage, it's very different.
It's a form-based culture.
So this is where we need your understanding and your sort of legal understanding and your understanding of what is happening in the city to help formulate a plan so that we can have the muscle to be able to start controlling and shaping and maintaining this character.
I have to go look at the urban management legislation. I've never looked at it. Okay. I'd like to see who it applies to and how it's enforced before any recommendations can be made.
So we don't get a place like an adult world that is completely sealed off. We want to see the dildos and the blow-up dolls. I'm joking. But you want to have shops that are friendly buildings that add to the character. So we want to kind of manage those. Yeah.
I went and asked them once. I said, "What are you doing in here?" "Oh, we're investigating a drug case." I said, "You don't investigate drug cases." So anyway, yeah.
Well, so, I mean, it is true about the implementation as well, because, and I mean, we've got examples in Virginia, because, well, I mean, Grant Avenue, you can quote that, they've gone through an extensive process also about what's the character of Grant Avenue, how do we preserve it. And it requires quite detailed drawings about principles. It's not about legislating exactly what you have to do, but it's principles. So, for instance, if we think that arcades along all the buildings, or in Main Road is something that should be retained, that's written in. How you design that arcade and stuff becomes a different
How
story.
it is designed is actually what makes it interesting.
The richness.
It needs to be there, but how you make yours look in the
Can I just
context.
say that when we did Campus Square, we had a document this thick about the character of that whole property and how it was going to extend the Melville character down to there. We had a street kind of grid that went through that replicated everything else. There were regulations about the open space, about what streets were in what sort of scale, where trees got planted, everything else. And there were about, 6 professionals from the neighborhood who sat down and drew that plan up. And I can tell you that the lawyers got the developers off.
The lawyers what?
Cut the developers off from actually implementing that. Because in the end, I'm just saying that there was a basket of rights. Okay? There was a basket of rights around things, and they said, when we went to the tribunal, they just said, we haven't used our full basket of rights, so what are you complaining about? And we said, but it's the way that it's being implemented, because it doesn't follow the urban. Oh, but that urban framework, wasn't like fully adopted because the developers never signed the document. Everybody else signed the document, but the developer didn't. And because they hadn't used their full basket of rights, they got away with it. So, it's...
Well, then, if that's the case, then maybe we can come up with some ideas as to which stakeholders have a say. And if the Residents Association, for instance, have a say in that, that's not a bad idea. Because, yes, you've got very good and very bad lawyers. You're quite right, whoever said that.
Well, the thing is, it was very bad.
Architects, yes.
Now you come with everybody on the same side. I have to say, what seems really clear to me, and I'm totally outsider to this, is what you all have together is a real care for the place where you live and to want to make it better. And I think instead of fighting, if you're a lawyer, I'm an architect, or a teacher, my mom is a teacher, right? So you would look at it from the school point of view, is come together to make sure that the development that happens in these areas that might not be in the document are good urban development. Because something you're kind of, people talk about buildings, architects particularly, but I think what is important is the spaces, as you say, in between the buildings and the places, and how they're designed or occupied. Because, if you start connecting that with that, it might become much more interesting. Because one of the issues I had in Scotland was car parking. People put car parking, like really bad car parking, in supermarkets and places, and then we thought, okay, what if we put trees in between the car parking spaces, we make them a little bit more human, even though it's a functional space. So I think it's the small detail of these things that helps you making a place, the place that it's be. And I mean, looking at, is that the 7th Street?
7th Street.
I just thought, from a complete outside point of view, I thought, you want to have cars, but you could just make it a little bit much better by increasing the pavement for pedestrians a little bit more. So the cars and the pedestrians live together, but it's not all given to the cars. There's a little bit more of a space for pedestrians so they can enjoy. And I think it's to look at the city from many different points of view. If I tend to look now at the city, because I've got a little boy, from a point of view of a child. Where, if I'm a mom and I want my son to be playing there, then I can have a cup of coffee. So maybe some of these spaces here could be playground space.
Well, you talk about parking, okay.
I don't know the context because I'm not a lawyer of Johannesburg.
All I'm saying is if there are 4-story developments which appear here, the residential properties directly next to them are going to suffer with regards to parking. The reason why is that these are very narrow roads. extremely
talking
narrow.
about 7th Street.
You know, they're very narrow, and the residents will take it hard.
But that's also why it needs to dovetail into the corridors of freedom, because that's increased mobility in the space. So, yes, we want to densify, but we also don't want to go to this car-dominant society. So how? Wait. The only way you can encourage people to use public transport and to encourage the city to give good public transport is to limit the availability and the convenience of a car. And you can only do that through design. So if you design that you only have limited car spaces, then you are forced into another option. And if you have another option with good public transport, then densification, 4-story buildings, 3-story buildings, these things all become realities. And
unfortunately,
cars.
we don't live in a country, we don't live in a city where public transport serves the actual routes of travel to your work. I now take 3 times as long to get to the High Court by travelling along Kingsway because there's only 1 lane for cars.
It's a chicken and egg situation.
It's disgusting.
But soon you'll be able to use a different.
I don't want to. I don't want to. I've got a car and I've got to travel all over the city to all the different courts. And just because there's a bus route 9 to town, which stops me getting into court very quickly, doesn't solve anyone's problems. This is an artificial idea.
Using the bus. It's not. There are 2 ways to look at it.
It's an artificial idea.
Can we? I think what we've agreed
getting off track again.
We could, with Derek, is that we agreed that there could be a mechanism that could look to help the vehicle to help manage this process. Now we just need to go down to the detail and give Yona the information he needs to create this 3D model for us, so he can feed it back to us.
Can I just say,
are
I think...
Are we combining all the results from all the different groups?
Yes.
Because, you know, what you were talking about now, the public space people had spoken about in 7th Street already about narrowing down trees, widening all of that stuff, as well as this movement to across, because I mean they all talk to each other and part of the steering committee.
There's a lot of interfaces between the groups.
So for everybody's information, we've done most of the other sessions: public space, safety, traffic calming, and he's got a lot of information already, so he's plugging that in. So now just this lens is around, just the form. So again,
I would say a couple of things. One is I think you as the consulting team need to bring something slightly more specific to the table, because I'm an architect. I could sit down and start drafting some of these design principles, but I can't do it in 20 minutes. And to ask a group like this to do it in a meeting in which everyone wants to get home and have dinner and be with their children or whatever is a bit of an issue. So I think you don't have to have all of the answers, but I think you need to put something more specific on the table.
There's a very, sorry to interrupt you, so there's a very detailed plan being developed in parallel as we speak at our office. It's 1 in 500. It's zoomed in scale. The drawing is bigger than this. Everybody's standing.
But to try and get to some of the specifics, some of the things that came out of the previous meeting along Main Road, in which we did the walkabout, were the idea of new buildings having a setback that is further back than the existing building line, so that gradually over time the sidewalk gets widened, or it gives you space for trees or whatever you want to do with the sidewalk, pedestrianizing the street to a greater degree. There was discussion about parking either being underneath, which is usually cost prohibitive in this kind of context, or at the back of the building, so the parking becomes a buffer between the bulk of the building and the residential neighborhood. That helps prevent scenarios like, what's the name of the mall down here where Spar is, in which the street front is just empty because there's a giant parking lot in front of it.
I second your suggestion. I think it's a great one. We can't decide on stuff today when there's no specifics presented to us.
I'm just trying to throw some of these in there so that they can be developed and then brought to the table next time.
Can't decide in 10 minutes. It's not possible.
No, but these are suggestions that he's asking them to incorporate in the
Carry on.
And then on 4th Avenue, we discussed the existing rights are 3 stories. We discussed keeping it at that. And in both 7th and Main Road, we discussed the possibility of requiring any retail or commercial property to have main entrances that open out to the street, so you don't have everything behind a wall, which is how it is existing on 7th Street and for the most part on Main Road, but something that we would want to extend because that's part of the heritage character of the neighborhood. And I would even put that same regulation on multi-unit residential space as well, that you have a main entrance from the sidewalk rather than from a parking lot that's behind a fence with razor wire on top of it, so that you demilitarize the aesthetic and make it something that is more open to a community.
So Denver, did you want to get consensus today?
No, I do.
You wanted consensus and...
Okay, if you feel that you'd like us to give consensus or reach consensus, my feeling is that we need specifics to consider. We can't just say, put this into your plan and put this into your recommendations, and you walk away. You need to meet again.
Yeah, this is the intention of this discussion is it comes a long way through a lot of workshops. So the layout here represents all the discussions that were held in the workshops. Andreas, we don't put a plan on the table. We want you people to put the plan on the table. This is just a picture reflecting your ideas. If it's not detailed enough, we can take that up. Which, like you've mentioned now, some more detail needs to be put onto this plan. We don't want to put our plan here. It's your plan.
Yeah.
We're just reflecting your views.
Yes, I
Your
understand what you're saying, but you're going to have to translate what we asked for.
Okay, so...
Okay, but so what you say is what we have here doesn't translate the workshops that you had.
Well, let me tell
was
you,
intention.
I can count only about 3 people here who have been to all the other workshops. I've been to every single one, and every time I come, there's different people here.
It's been largely
There's different people here every time.
and people with agendas related to the precinct plan.
Okay, but you've been involved in all the workshops.
I have, and I've been
So
mostly
you should know then, does this present the discussions that you had?
But we just need to have, what he's saying, that let's just get some more detail and then we can come back.
But we want to know what the detail is, because that should have been discussed. This is reflecting the detail that was discussed in the workshop.
Exactly.
But
So
I'm saying I think there was a little bit more detail that was discussed in the previous one that is not here, which is what I was
I'm
just
gathering
getting at.
that. So please, can we just get some more detail, Derek, maybe from your side as well, that we need to capture so that we can reflect this on the plan.
But when do you want it by?
Sorry?
When do you want it by?
Well, we were actually supposed to share that with you tonight, to show you.
I think we've had a great discussion tonight, and I think we've come closer.
Surely we do, and that's why I say.
But to force us to tell you what we want right now tonight, I'm not sure that's realistic.
Okay, but give us more detail that you want to see on this, because we want your detail to be reflected on this. And I think you've contributed quite a few crucial things here.
Were there other things?
Give us some more,
Trying to recall.
so that we can reflect that.
Wasn't there a discussion along the 7th Avenue?
Yeah, there were other
widening the
streetscaping
pavement?
things.
There was a
There
lot.
wasn't a lot
Which is what she
So that was the movement, the public space.
Shared surfaces, widening the
public space.
specific parking pockets. Yeah, so that was in the other focus group, transport and movement, and public spaces.
So the idea is to incorporate all the suggestions from the various workshops into one comprehensive plan that joins everything together, and then there's a further discussion on that.
Exactly.
Isn't that the idea?
That's what we're busy doing. We're trying to incorporate
this
all
isn't the
that.
final
Maybe I should
meeting,
just
it's
say
another
that
meeting. Yeah.
once we've consolidated all the ideas from the focus group, and you specifically were part of all the focus groups up to now. Some people attended all the focus groups. We will consolidate. We are having a workshop on Thursday, and all the ideas will be consolidated and discussed, and it will be presented again in public. So that's the intention: is to present this again to say, is this the truth? So that everybody can see this again in a consolidated manner.
And it's likely to go through a few iterations.
For sure.
Because people will react to
Yes.
then things
But-
that get presented and then get adapted.
We would just like to request then, please give us what we've missed here, because we need to capture this, the final data.
In terms of urban form.
In terms of
Only in
urban
terms of
form,
urban form.
we went through safety, we went through the other focus group, good suggestions, and they were happy with what we've made some changes on movement, pavements, all those have been incorporated in the other groups.
There were a few other things that came out of the previous meeting, but they're not related to building form. They're more streetscaping related, so I don't know if this is the right forum for it. But one of that one of the discussions
please
was
mention that we
to
could take
explore
it
the possibility of having a median strip down the middle of Main Road.
Yes.
It may not be possible depending on the widths, but
So we're looking at that with the traffic engineer from Cape at the moment.
right, and trees
Yes.
was part of the discussion on Main Road.
It shortens
So-
the distance for pedestrians to get across.
So to
The
answer your
median,
question,
the median strip's been tried in Orange Grove on Leeuwhoek, and they keep putting it up, taking it down, putting it up, taking it down. This fence that goes down the middle of Leeuwhoek Avenue, it's very contentious.
But you don't need a fence.
No, we're not talking about
just a
You just median with trees. Yeah.
Sorry, just to, for the context of Garrett, so yes, we have included all of that in the previous meeting, so let's just...
Okay. Then my suggestion generally would be that even though this group is focused on built form, that you bring the entirety of what has been done into these workshops, even if you still do them in individual groups. Because it's difficult for us to see the entire precinct plan coming together if we're only shown a small snapshot.
I agree with you. Unfortunately, this has been fragmented now. So we don't know what the other groups are even discussing, and I don't think that's right.
Well,
that's why you
everybody was
bring
invited to every meeting, and no one was here every
We
night.
can't come to every meeting then, right?
we also have to accept, we also have to accept it's very difficult to discuss all 5 focus groups in one evening. That is,
From now onwards,
it's a
one
challenge, so we really try to manage that
Did
as
you,
far
know
as
that,
possible.
did you know that I've never received one invitation to come to one of these focus groups? I find out by mistake from other people, even though I give my details on the register every single time, I never get contacted. I come here off my own volition.
Could I actually? Sorry, can I just notification? It's interesting the comment. The end
No,
of
there was an MRA notification of all of them. So your body put out about every single...
I know 1 or 2 people here who've received, no please, I know 1 or 2 people here who have received personal invitations, they've been phoned, and they've been emailed. I've seen that.
Well, that's the invitation.
And that just happens to be some public
It's
announcement.
another MRA.
So M-I-L-A-E.
Oh, there's 2 bodies.
I just had
I've been personally invited.
What's the name of the gentleman? Derek.
Sorry?
Derek. Sorry.
You must just write his name on it.
Derek. Hello.
Derek.
I was just talking. Yeah, to yourself, because you were mentioning before when you come to every meeting, and you mentioned before about the way you move through the city with a car when you go to work, that you take the car and you go to this part of the city and the other part. Okay, but I was kind of thinking, if this master plan is connected to the freedom corridors, and the lady was mentioning about social housing, I don't know in South Africa, but when I work in social housing, people are looking to have a good, nice house for their family, but they cannot afford to have a car. So if you have social housing in different pockets here, you don't need car parking space, and these people could use the public infrastructure to go to work, which is completely different from what you are saying, but that's much better than a kind of paramilitarized environment of super protection, you know?
Yeah.
So I think all I'm trying to say is that there's different balances that you can find here in the plan, and maybe, you know, I like driving through the city, but my son prefers to take the bus, so, you know, depends on what we do at different times. So I think you can, you know, what it becomes very clear to me, in spite of all your different ideas, and you said, okay, I've come to every single meeting, and of course you've been to every single discussion. I think what's really important is that you all have different expertise, and you want the best for this place. So I think it's really important you all come with your expertise together to make sure that whatever this plan has a consensus of a really good place this place could be. You know, and I think that's really, you know, instead of arguing, I mean, I haven't been to all the meetings, but it's really interesting and stuff, and I think that could be really useful because you know a lot about law in your work, I don't. But you could tell me how to do a good master plan.
About integration, my concern as well is that I'm not comfortable with a precinct plan which will encourage pedestrianisation of Melville to the extent that people with cars don't want to live here anymore.
No, but you can have both. You can have both. I mean, I've worked in in the UK, it became legislation. It's called home zoning. And basically what we tried to do, and it worked a lot in suburban areas, is to reduce the car speeds to 20 miles per hour. So this means kids could play in the street, the crime would be reduced. instead of having the cars coming over with bolt holes to stop the speed, because it doesn't work.
No.
So what I'm
that could work in South Africa. It doesn't.
No, but you need to be more hopeful. Yes. You need to be happier about a better future for the town. Because in a future, but
Doomsday is
got a plan for a better future.
No, it's not possible.
Do you have some, Lone wants to say something?
No, I'm just saying that these were all, as you say, it's very difficult to manage a big group trying to discuss everything. So now there have been the individual focus groups. All the information from those photographs will be put onto one set of proposals. And from now onwards it will be meetings of everyone, not separate.
So are we saying that, are we suggesting that let's rather, Garrett, get all the stuff three-dimensionally on some form of sort of representation, and then we can have this discussion?
I think you need to give people something to react to. If we're talking about trying to develop a design code that protects the character of Melville, we can put the broad strokes in, but the detail needs to come from you. And until there's something that people can just give a thumbs up, a thumb down, or have a debate about, it's going to be hard to really
to visualize that.
hone in on the final.
I just want to make a comment.
Soon.
Okay, I just want to make one comment now, and that's an observation. I'm really just in Melville for when this project started, not really, about 3 months now. If you go through Melville, it's different from other places, and it's a pity that Derek have left, and I think he would have appreciated my point. I've been here on a Saturday, I believe so. Maybe I'm dreaming, that's fine, but I was here on a Sunday, on a Saturday morning at 7, on a Friday evening, Saturday. I see women walking here with prams in the street, in the first place. I see cyclists here. I don't see that in the area. I'm not going to tell you where I stay. You won't dream of a woman walking with a pram in the street talking to a friend, pushing a pram here down in 7th Road. It doesn't exist. Melville is different. Now, that's just an observation as an outstander. And that asks for, if we're not going to manage that, if you're not going to manage that, you're going to lose that. So please note that. You can have a nice coffee. Even this afternoon, I came through earlier, I sat there in one of the restaurants. It's nice to sit here, people walk around, feel comfortable, feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's true. I don't have that in my area, and I'm staying in Joburg in the area. We don't have that. And if you don't manage that, you're going to lose that. I'm telling you.
Okay.
That to me is crucial.
That's true.
Okay, so let's put something down that we can react to in more detail. And Yoda, do you want to just give us, in terms of production, yes, we're dealing with production as well?
So we've had a Revit model like a few weeks ago already as a base drawing. So with the workshops, we've been layering all those comments into the model, and we're gonna translate it into. We'll use there's a software called Lumion or Enscape that you can do some renderings, some visualizations that people can see. That's what it looks like, and the building's that high, and the person is this small, and then you'll see the pavement and the finishes on the pavement and that kind of thing. So we're busy working on it as we speak. We're having a meeting on Thursday, so in terms of the consulting room, there might be comments and a bit of tweaking and twisting and changing a bit. So I'm hoping that we could have something that people can look at and it's recognizable as three-dimensional space. Hopefully by mid next week, to round about that. Yeah.
Just make sure your renders have a Melville character to them.
Yeah.
Portland, Oregon, or New York, or
Yeah. So now,
real people, local people.
So the buildings have been, we spent quite a bit of time to model the canopies and the proportions and
Okay, so we'll use this database to send the information out and say give people a couple of days. Maybe this week we'll know when the meeting we can set up for next week. But do you think we can then very quickly get together next week and then look at something and then add our comments and we have a bit of a debate and then we can wrap that bit up, because this group always seems to be push and pull, but for this reason,
This group is absolutely perfect.
I know, it's great, it's perfect. It's a basket of
It's an individual.
I think one of the biggest problems is that people still quite don't understand what a precinct plan is.
This is the
you know,
point.
and
I don't,
until
but at least
such time as people have a better understanding of what is envisaged, and that's not necessarily 3D rendering, it's actually an explanation to people as to what the end result is going to be. You're going to have the continual push and pull. And I think the one thing that you actually need to clarify to the residents as a whole is what is actually in this for them, ultimately, and how it's going to be applied. And until such time as you do that, you're going to be forever bashing your head against the wall.
This is my sixth
All right, we would attempt to communicate that again to everyone as best we can. Okay, so are there any comments or questions at the moment?
I just wanted to say thank you for having me here, you know, just coming like this and commenting on your plan. So openly, because I don't work in Joburg, I was quite free. So I couldn't do that in Edinburgh, in the UK, but here I was like, okay, do this here, and maybe that's I never did say anything, so I really appreciate your welcoming.
Thank you. These very friendly people.
Absolutely, yeah. I loved him. I thought he was great.
Okay, well, thank you very much, guys. I want to...
It's a lawyer, really.
Yeah. The meeting is closed. Thank you very much. We can go run back onto our warm houses. My ankles are getting cold, so I don't wear socks. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.